Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and today we're going to be creating a trio of floral cards using the brand new March 2023 card kit from Simon Says Stamp called Happy Hello. I'm going to be using a combination of the pattern papers from the kit to frame up the beautiful stamped images from the Happy Hello stamp set. I decided to go through the pattern paper in the kit and pair it up with like colors. I tend to gravitate towards monochromatic crafting a lot of the time, and so I kind of went with that theme where we're going to create the same basic design for the 3 cards, but each one will be a different color combination. We're going to be using or building our own little floral garden with this wonderful stamp set. I'm going to be using 3 of the stems, 3 of the flowers, and a variety of greetings. Even though I'm going to use the same basic design, I will be stamping the flowers themselves in different colors of ink to coordinate back to the pattern paper in the kit. The pattern paper I'm using is from the Simple Stories Wildflower 6x8 paper pad. First, I'm going to take my paper trimmer and we're going to cut some strips. I need some strips for the 2 strips for the bottom and 1 strip for the top. For the bottom of each design, I'm going to start with a strip that measures 1.5 inches. I'm also going to use a strip that measures 1.25 inches. I will be cutting I will be then die cutting a 1-inch strip for the top of the card. So whatever I kind of call my more simple or smaller print, less busy print, if you will, that is going to be the design that goes at the top and is layered underneath the busier print along the bottom edge. And I just kind of eyeballed it, like whatever looked the best to me, but I love the monochromatic. It really helps kind of keep the color selection super easy. After I have my strips, I'm going to take one of my favorite die sets of all time from Simon Says Stamp. It is the scallop stitches. And with the scallop stitches, I'm going to take the largest scallop die from that collection. There's kind of a mini, a small, and then this bigger one. I'm going to use the bigger one and I'm going to line the scallop up with the edge of the 1.5 inch strip. And then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, leaving me with a beautiful scallop edge that also has stitching detail. It's such a simple thing, but it literally is one of my very, very all-time favorite dies for creating beautiful decorative edges. I'm also going to layer then the 1.25 inch strip on top of there, and then with the 1 inch strip, I will be die cutting it exactly the same as I did the bottom border, lining up the scallop with the largest die from that set with one of the edges and die cutting it. And I am going to mass produce those all at one time. I'm also going to be lining up my flower and my stem with leaves, and I'm going to start in the middle and work my way out. Now, I did this part before I die cut the top scallop because I wanted to make sure I had left enough room for my flowers. Here's that set again that I like so much. We're going to start with the leaf in the center. I've picked 2 shades of ink to use to stamp my leaves. We're going to be using a combination of Aspen or Sage. I will do, I believe, the Sage in the center and Aspen on the outer leaves. So I'm using my borders as a guide, and I am going to stamp all of my backgrounds at one time. I did cut the white cardstock included in the March kit down to 4.25 by 5.5 inch panels. I'm using 3 of those panels for my 3 cards, and on the 4th panel, I'm going to use that to stamp my sentiments. After I've stamped the center stem, I am going to take all 3 panels and stamp the outer. And I'm going to repeat this, and I accidentally messed this one up. You can see instead of lining it up at the top, I lined it up at the bottom. So I'm going to flip that one over and we will re-stamp it. Sometimes that happens. Always a bummer. But luckily you can just flip it over. Then I'm going to go through and add my flowers. I'm using the Hero Arts scrubber with a little stamp cleaner on it to scrub that off. And I do, of course, need to re-stamp my center leaf. So I lined it up with one of my other panels and quickly will do that one. The Misty is so great for this particular technique in case you need to ink up your images more than once like I needed to here. Let's go ahead and take our outer flowers first, and keeping pretty much with the dark in the center and lighter shade out on the edges, let's go ahead and stamp our lighter tone first. And we're going to do all 3 panels in different colors. So while our leaves and stems were all the same greens, we're going to go different here. So I'm using GUAVA Pawsitively Saturated ink for these flowers. I'm going to clean those, remove my panel, and do the next panel, stamp the next panel. I'm going to use the color Morning from Simon Says Stamp for my blue panel. And then for my yellow flowers, I didn't really think that the yellows matched my pattern paper very well. So I actually grabbed Butter Bar and Mustard. This is going to be the Butter Bar from Hero Arts, and I am going to use those colors to stamp my yellow flowers. Now, you may notice in the finished card photos from the beginning of the video that the backgrounds of my cards are not stark white like they are right now. I had intended to keep them stark white, but changed my mind. So that color is Caramel that I used for the center flower. So I'm on to the center flower now, and I will share when we get to the assembly part of the card why I ended up adding some ink over the top of my panels, which we'll see here in a little bit. That is the color Twilight, and then this is going to be the color Rose. Once we have all of our backgrounds stamped, it is time to add some detail. I'm going to take some colored pencils and very, very quickly add some shading just to give a little bit more interest and dimension to my flowers. Nothing crazy. These are the Polychromos colored pencils, and I'm literally just adding a tiny bit of shading with one color per section. This will give a little added interest. I'm going to match my colors to each stamped image, and the exact Polychromos colored pencil color I'm using is listed in the description below the video here on YouTube. Now, once I'm done with this, I'm going to lay the borders over the top and the bottom. And for me, it's very creamy and ivory, and the white is just not doing it. And I was kind of bummed at this point. And I left this in the video because I really wanted to talk about how you can turn something that maybe isn't going exactly the way you want, because I think we've all been there, into something that you really love. So for me, I took some Latte Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively Saturated ink, and using a pretty light hand, I am going over that center part of my panel. And when I lay the borders over my panel now, it gives it a little bit more of a rustic or vintage feel, but I think it matches the pattern paper much, much better than the stark white of the background. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my top and bottom, and I did leave them longer, and then I'll just simply take my scissors and trim away any of that excess. Once I have all of that trimmed away, I want to distress my background even more, so I'll take some white gouache. I use a plastic storage box as a splatter box. You can see it's been pretty well loved lately. And I am going to add a little water to my gouache to help it move a little bit better. And then I'll take a paintbrush and splatter the background and set it aside to dry. Now, while the gouache is white, I do feel that it doesn't really take away from anything. Now, this white cardstock quote unquote problem is going to come into play here in a minute with the sentiment strips as well. So I decide that I love how that turned out. We are going to do the exact same thing for the remaining two panels. I'm going to take my colored pencils, add some quick and easy shading, and then we'll go over the whole thing with the Latte Pawsitively saturated ink. The shading really doesn't take long. It would be a step you could totally leave out if you don't care about adding that extra shading and save even more time. You could also go ahead and stamp all of your flowers in one shade or one tone if you were, because you could get multiple strips out of one 6x8 piece of pattern paper from the kit. So maybe you want to make, maybe 3 to 4, you could probably get 3 to 4 cards from one sheet of paper, pattern paper in the kit, and they could all be exactly the same. You could make a set of like maybe thank you cards or something like that. And with the yellow, same thing. It's kind of got that creamy undertone. So the latte ink to me just looks so much better than what the white did. The white was just a little too pristine and perfect for this particular card. Again, I'm going to pick up my white gouache, splatter up that background. It looks great. I'm going to set that aside and let that dry while I go ahead and shade my final card. The colors of the blue here, I really feel like the blues probably matched the blue pattern paper the best. And this was one card where I probably could have left the background white. However, because I already had done the other two cards a little bit more of that vintage or rustic type feel, I went ahead and did the same thing here, and I do think it worked very well. Let's do the lighter shade of blue now. And I used a pretty light hand, and I'm not over blending. I don't want to completely cover up that base color of ink, but just add to it with my colored pencil. Once I've added my last borders to my last background and splattered it with the splatter box, I'm going to take that remaining quarter sheet of white cardstock and stamp 3 of the greetings from that Happy Hello stamp set on the pattern paper, or pardon me, on the white cardstock with black VersaFine ink. This is the Onyx black ink. I'm going to die cut all of these with Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Labels dies, and these two are a little too white, a little too pristine for my cards. So I could stamp them on another piece of paper, but I opted to, first I thought I'd use the blending brush and that wasn't working that great. I decided to do the direct to paper technique using a couple of brown ink pads that I had on my desk. So this is going to be sand. Well, this is actually Cup of Joe from Hero Arts, and then we will use sand. So around the edges, I did the Cup of Joe, which really darkens them. I have done direct to paper a couple times in the last few months. This used to be something that I did all the time years ago. It was super popular in card making and scrapbooking and all of that. And every time I use this technique, I remember why I love it, because it's so quick and easy. Now, even with the dark edges, I feel like they're still a little too perfect, but I don't want to cover them with the darker brown. So I'm just going to lay it on my glass mat and rub that ink pad over it. This is sand. And as that ink absorbs into the cardstock, it will fade a little bit, so it won't be quite as dark. And I like how this looks a lot better, almost like they were stamped on a wood grain type of patterned paper. We're going to pop these up along the bottom of the card with foam adhesive. Since they're not a bright white, I feel like they just work so much better in this design. I love the Simon Says Stamp foam adhesive. We're going to center it underneath the flowers on the wider border along the bottom edge of the card. And then the top part of the card doesn't have as much going on. We have our flowers, of course, in the center. We have our layered pattern papers along the bottom with a sentiment strip. And so at the top of the card, I feel like we need to add just a little something. And with the kind of rustic feel that I went for with this design, I am going to add some thin twine around the top and tie it into a little bow. I've also added some Trinity Stamps jelly hearts. They're one in the flower center and one off to the side. I'm going to wrap my twine around, knot it. I had a little trouble knotting it. Tie it into a little bow, and I will secure the knot to my card front with a little liquid glue. So once I get it secured, I'm going to tie it in a bow, put some glue, put an acrylic block, or you could use your tweezers to hold it down in place until that glue dries, and then we'll secure the back with some adhesive. And I love that little touch of twine at the top as well. Let's go ahead and do that for the remaining cards. Let's secure the panel to our card base. I'm going to use white top fold card bases from Simon Says Stamp. I'm using some strong Altenew adhesive to help hold that down. And we're just going to continue doing this for the final 2 card designs. Any type of thin string or crochet thread, whatever you have in your stash, the string I used, I've had in my stash for years, like 15 years, I think. Very, very long time. And I did use a more natural color as opposed to white to blend in, of course, with everything else. Now, if you didn't want to start with a white card base in the background, I think stamping, just like I did, you could do all of these steps exactly like this, but use a Desert Storm or craft card base rather than the white card base and then making it that kind of craft color or light craft color. And that would kind of eliminate one of those other extra steps. I always like to kind of go on the rule that everything is fixable and you can adjust as you're going to make the design work. Here is a look at all 3 finished cards. I absolutely love how they turned out. I think this stamp set is so much fun. The pattern paper is gorgeous and the kit is filled with even more amazing products. Just an amazing value and great kit. I hope this has inspired you to create some beautiful cards with the March 2023 card kit called Happy Hello. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube for your convenience. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.